right. Recording good to go?
It's running.
Awesome. Welcome all to this next humanitarian session of Future Outlook. I'm really excited to see y'all here today. We're kind of, now it's ended up being a line just because of the space in the room, but this is supposed to be a space where you can kind of see the other people who are talking. You can engage with other people as we go. The plan for today is that we will be hearing from quite a few different people who've had different insights on different topics on what the future of the humanitarian environment is looking like. And we're just going to do a quick introduction round of all the speakers that we have joining us today. And after that, we're going to do an even quicker introduction round of all of the other people that we have here today, because we want everyone to be involved in some way or another. So hello, everybody. My name is Gerdo or Kato, depending on where you come from. I work at the Humanitarian Logistics Institute in Helsinki in Finland, and I'm very happy to have been able to invite and moderate and support a lot of these discussions, presentations, and conversations today through the Next Humanitarian Network. Let's continue with our online speakers. Ayosha and Laura up there.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here, although online. My name is Laura. I'm originally from Bulgaria, but I got introduced into the humanitarian world via Tilburg University, where Kenny is teaching a course named Digital Infrastructure and Business Innovation. So that's a quick intro for me.
Okay, then it's over to me. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Alyosha. I am a master's student with United Nations University in Bonn, Germany. I until recently worked for the International Federation of the Red Cross, and yeah, that's how I got into all this humanitarian stuff.
Lovely. We have one other person joining online, although she's calling in from the East Coast of the US, and it is currently 5 a.m., so she'll be joining us a little bit into the session. Somewhere in person here?
Yeah, my name is Remo. I joined the humanitarian sector less than a year ago. I started in UN OCHA, and now I work with a podcast called Humanitarian. And just recently, yesterday actually, I started in a think tank called Here Geneva. And I will not do a speech today, but I will, based on if we have time for it, based on this discussions we have in the end, then start some conversations based on what is common interest. Yeah.
Sure. Great.
Cool. So my name is Maartje. I'm a master's student, international water management, and I'm focused on emergency wash. And I'm currently in my thesis phase of this master, and I will present about that in this session.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to go around, and we have online participants and in-person participants. And I would love it if we could just do a quick name and just one sentence about your interest in joining this conversation on a future outlook next to humanitarians. And we can start just over here.
Okay, so my name is Anna. I'm from Lithuania, Vilnius, and we work together with partners with innovation laboratories for climate actions. And I'm very curious about how you envisage these future humanitarians to see the trends.
Sure.
Doug Parton, Director of Talent and Human Resources at Global Support and Development. We're a disaster relief and recovery organization based out of the United States. And I've been in HR, mostly in the corporate sector, for about 20 years now, new to the humanitarian section. So I'm really big into recruiting and meeting talent. So this would be a great place for me.
Awesome. Welcome.
I'm Winifred AKZA. I'm a lecturer in public health from the UK, and I focus on IDP health in conflict settings. I'm trying to find a way to motivate my students, so it helped to get into the humanitarian sector while studies are research around it.
My name is Chloe. I'm a shelter architect, and I was curious to hear about the session and what's going to be talked about.
Cool. Yeah, my name is Deogratius Chibule, based out of Kampala, Uganda. I work with humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, information management, data collection, making maps, work a lot with youth and young people want to be involved in the humanitarian sector. So I want to hear about that in the session.
Oh, this is me. Oh, hi, I'm Diana. I'm a student from Tilburg University, and I work together with Professor Kenny for the Next Generation Humanitarians. So yeah, it's just interesting to see people from different backgrounds and how they work together for this.
I'm Sophia. I'm also with the Next Humanitarians here. And yeah, I'm currently majoring in social sciences and hopefully also a future humanitarian. So I'd like to see, yeah, where it's going and how I can potentially also help.
My name is Andrea Bartolucci. I'm an assistant professor at Leiden University and also work with the WHO EMT. And we just created a new elective on humanitarian response to disaster and emergency at Leiden. So yeah, collect information.
Yeah, lastly, I'm Alex, also from Tilburg University. I study law. And yeah, I'm here to delve a bit deeper into the humanitarian world as well as represent the Next Humanitarians.
Welcome. Awesome. We have a few online participants. Would anyone online like to go through? We can go in alphabetical order to make it easy, starting with Alice online.
Hello, I just been invited to this event. I'm Alice. I work at the IFRC in Geneva. I just had a huge interest in some presentations today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Paredes. I'm a psychologist with a master's degree in disaster management, and I'm a Standard Spheres train of trainers, and I'm living in Sweden.
Julia, online.
Hello, I'm Julia. I am an intern at UNHCR in Brussels, Belgium, and I have a great interest in all what is humanitarian work field, and so I'm trying to see a bit different meetings. Thank you.
Jose?
Yes, good morning to everyone. My name is Jose Benite. I'm the child protection for Save the Children in Spain. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Is Leah online?
Hello, hopefully you can hear me well. I'm Leah. I'm a geography master student and I got invited to this event and I'm just interested in some of the current debates in this field. Thank you.
Welcome. And Taru.
Greetings from Finland. I'm master's degree student in global health and crisis management and now trying to put my net on the water, so to say.
Nice, welcome. Always good to see some more Finland representation here. And Tina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina. I'm also from Finland, but actually I'm in Geneva, but I didn't make it to the conference center yet. I'm here to get inspiration for my thesis subject and yeah, to see if I could, or if I would like to, or what kind of opportunities there would be for me to work in the humanitarian field. I'm currently employed in the private sector.
Great, good to see you joined. Min Lee, WFP. All right, we'll hold off on that one. Zaid.
Hello, my name is Zaid Idlibi. I am a program. I work in program unit in UNHCR, Jordan. I'm interested in this debate in relation basically to how it looks and how it affects the refugees in general. Thank you.
Great, thank you all for joining online as well. We had 3 people join in last minute. You aren't, just because you're late doesn't mean you don't get to introduce yourself. Why don't we start over here? Would you like to say name and your interest here?
My name is Jacob from Denmark, Undak, which is on the OCHA response, and slightly older generation. So I'm keen to see how we can help the next generation.
Great, great. And way in the back?
Oh, hi, I'm Kayatan. I'm one of the Next Humanitarians. So, yeah, from Tilburg University. That's pretty much it.
Great.
Hello, I'm Ila. Sorry for being late. I'm struggling with HNPW and life balance right now.
Sure.
I'm here because I'm interested in hearing what young humanitarians have to say, and then also share something about misinformation and disinformation.
And Ela is also one of our speakers who will be joining us today.
I'll be late to my own funeral.
That's okay. We had some nice introduction going on. So the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, because 2 people combined the presentations, are going to be, we're going to have a mix of conversations and presentations. Basically, what happened is anyone who was interested, part of the Next Humanitarians Network, who reached out, was given 10 minutes to speak about any particular topic or passion of their own. It can be 10 minutes of presentation and no questions allowed, but it could also be 1-minute presentation and the rest of it a discussion, or all of it just critical thinking about the topics that we have at hand. I made a little bit of a surprise because we don't actually have an order set before coming today, so it'll be a little bit of a on-the-spot thing. Throughout this, feel free to write down questions you have. There will be a chance to discuss this and talk about this. And then basically everybody in the room, and I know a lot of people online, will be participating in other sessions that be around at HNPW throughout the week. So feel free to grab people a particular topic of interest that you find here.
Shall I also introduce myself?
Oh yes, Kenny, of course, our man behind the curtain.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to have you here. My name is Kenny Meesters. I'm an associate professor at Tilburg University, specialized in crisis information management. Besides that, I'm also an UNDAC member and a UCPM member, so I try to stay in practice as much as I can. But one of the things that has always interested me is coming from my own experience, the knowledge that young people have, the skill set that we often miss. But a lot of young people don't know to find their way to the humanitarian community. You all made it here, so congratulations. You already passed a lot of hurdles. But I'm also keen to say, like, how do we motivate a new generation? How do we inform students from all different disciplines that we need? So that's also my reason I've been coming here for a couple of years, and happy to see that the momentum is building and to facilitate these sessions together with kids.
Great, thanks. And thanks for being the man on the tech for the day. It makes things easier for the presenters to make sure
Information management, right?
runs smoothly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we'll start online with our first presentation. Laura, would you want to present from your own computer, or would you prefer me to handle the PowerPoints?
I can share my slides. One second. Let's see. Share screen. Okay, share. Okay, do you see my presentation?
See you and hear you. Your 10 minutes start now.
Well, hello everyone. Today, what I'm going to talk about is how to empower communities, and particularly my view on it, which is a software that I've been researching on how to develop, that I decided to call Relief Connect. But first, a quick overview. So I'm going to talk about my background, why we need to innovate communicating with communities, the methodology behind it, the issue at hand. I will show you a quick corporate innovation versus the humanitarian innovation I'm working on. We're going to discuss in briefly what is exactly Relief Connect and what is the future of it. And then we'll have a little bit of time for a discussion, I hope. So that's me. My name is Laura Boneva. I'm 23 years old and I originally come from Bulgaria. I have quite a bit of corporate background. So my journey started with banking, where I did revenue accounting. Then I joined the fast-moving consumer goods with supply chain innovation finance. And I am currently working at Frisant Campina within the digital marketing management discipline. On the other side, I'm also a Tilburg University student with pursuing a Bachelor of International Business Administration, which I'm hopefully going to graduate this summer, where I actually signed up for my last course that I have left before graduation, which is Digital Innovation and Business Structure course that Kenny is offering. And this is how I actually stumbled upon the humanitarian world, where we were presented with a very interesting course project on working on improving the communicating with communities during disasters. So how this course works is that we follow a methodology in order to research ways that we can actually improve the communication with communities during disaster. It's basically a lot of research and asking questions on the case and research. So first they came with us with the question, why haven't we innovated recently in communicating with communities? And then what we did in this course, we asked around about the context. What is the context of the organization? What are the organizational triggers to innovate? What are the technological triggers to innovate? And then we actually asked the question, okay, but what is the organizational innovation capacity that the UN, or in our case, we focused on UN OCHA, what are the innovation capacity that we have at hand? What is the digital structure that's already established? Make a SWOT analysis. Then step 4 was the COCD box, where you basically categorize your ideas into blue, yellow, or red, where red is what you're looking for because these are the innovative, yet quite at hand and feasible solutions that you could offer to the problem. Then at step 5, we had to choose one or combine multiple of our ideas and provide a solution design, develop a prototype, and talk about how we would develop this. And step 6 is something that I'm currently working on, which is building the actual business case of the solution, the cost, the benefits, and the impact. So why should we innovate communicating with communities? Well, from all the interviews that I had on the topic with the topic proposers, I heard stories of tents being provided to communities that were actually not needed, and people used them as bonfires. Also, I heard a story of, oh, we delivered rice during this situation, but people actually needed rice seeds because it was the season to plant them. So then we had to just continue providing rice for the whole year. And that's obviously quite an unfortunate situation. So I decided to tackle this problem, which is in particular, how can we increase the goods delivered versus needed ratio? How can we decrease delivering the surplus of supplies that are not needed to the communities? How can we also engage more the community in making their own decisions about their own situations during disasters? And also how we can increase the community involvement in the collaborative rescue efforts. This all would lead, in theory, to enhanced trust in the UN OCHA, plus more empowered communities during disaster. So how to actually innovate it? Well, I decided to present to you, based on my perspective, corporate world innovation versus my way of thinking about the humanitarian world innovation. So in the humanitarian world, what we see is that usually the innovation capacity is already available within the organization. We just need to activate it. We need to think of other ways to use it. So in principle, just apply a different perspective, which I also did in my case for the project. So the inspiration that I drew upon for my proposal for my project was this very cool initiative that I worked on during my work in Friesland Campina, where they had a ERP system, SAP, where you store all the resources and information on resources that they have, which we combined with the digital asset management system, where we store all the digital assets, namely pictures, videos, etc. We combined that with the product information management system, where you store more specific product information about the products that you communicate then with, for example, supermarkets, etc. And then the innovation that we came up with was a very cool 3D rendering of product images solution that is based on all of these systems, just put in a different perspective, combined, plus a little bit of integration magic. And then we came up with this. Now, how my thought process worked for the humanitarian innovation that I'm proposing is basically the same. Use the systems that we already have available, just put them through a different perspective. So we already have Umoja, which is the Enterprise Resource Planning System of the UN. We combine that with MDAT, which is the main disaster database that we have available. And then that is also combined with, for instance, it's not solidified yet in the project, but for instance, the Red Cross resource data database. And then we do some magic APIs, and what do we come up with? We come up with something like Relief Connect, which is a very cool disaster resource management solution. And now what exactly this does is that it takes historical data based on disasters from all of those systems, and then it gives potentially to people in the region a list of resources that they can use for the specific region that they are at, time of year that they're at, type of disaster that they're having. So this is the base idea. And now I'm going to show you what exactly is Relief Connect. Well, here I have prepared a bunch of the screens that I developed for the low fidelity design model. So this is the main screen that they're going to see, in theory, very simplistically presented, where they can check the current inventory that they have of resources in the region. They can add inventory, and they can also see the current resource gaps. And when they click on disaster, the big red button, they're going to get a little survey where they're going to be able to type in the number of people affected, the type of disaster they're having, and the date of the disaster. You have to keep in mind here that one window that I skipped was the registration window for this app, where they can also input their exact location and other data that is further going to be used in order to track down within the databases what exactly resources they might need. So they fill in this very quick, very feasible survey, because as we know, during disaster, everything is very dynamic and we don't want to waste time in filling in long surveys. And then what this generates, with a little bit of background connections with the systems I just showed you, is this suggested resource list, in this case for a week. And here, the ambassadors can add what resources more they may need, adjust the levels of resources that may be needed, etc. And now you may be wondering, I'm talking about ambassadors. Well, what I mean by ambassadors is something that is based already on a project that the UN is working on, which is in engaging the local communities. So this project that the UN has going on is basically making sure that the local leaders within like different villages or little cities or regions, they're the one person that the UN representatives can connect with, and the one person that also is responsible in helping out in the preventive measures against the disaster. So my idea is that we use that one person to also be doing this. So the next few windows that I have here is the add inventory window, where we have manual addition of inventory. They can import Excel inventory, they can import CSV inventory, and they can also just connect via API key already an inventory system that they may have. And what is all of this inventory? Well, this is just to make sure that the local businesses have a place where they can put in what resources are available within the region, so that we just don't assume that everything needs to come from outside, where most of the solution, most of the resources that may be needed during the disaster, well, they're already available locally. We just need to find a way to systematically present that and, well, find a way that we can use it in a fast way instead of having to draw it on boards. So this would save a lot of time, in my opinion. And this is also something that is very useful from the solution, which is the resources gaps. So this is the report that is generated based on the suggested report that we saw first, which was what may be needed by this community. Then we combine that with the inventory of resources that are already available. And then it generates this list, which are the gaps between what is had versus what is needed. And this can then be, of course, used by UN OCHA representatives in order to be able to manage to get supplies from somewhere else to the people. So what is the future of Relief Connect, of this solution? Well, the main idea is that we can go from manual input and calculations on a whiteboard to something even more innovative, which could be, for example, integrating it with a model that students at Tilburg University already have developed via the Zero Hunger Lab, which is called the Optimus model. And the way it works is basically it optimizes the resource allocation for food in order to help tackle the global goal of reducing hunger. But here I was thinking maybe in the future we can connect that with the actual resources and then optimize the allocation like this instead of having to write it on a whiteboard to do that. And also some cool feature that could be added in the future potentially is also exact resource location mapping. So having a map where you can see what resource is located where. And also it could potentially calculate an optimized delivery route on how this resource can arrive at the location that it's needed as fast as possible. So I talked a lot. What is the main idea? The main idea is that we have all of this historical data that seemingly is not being used. And the way to help us in the future in optimizing the disaster response that we offer is to base it on the historical data. Because, well, after all, if we don't learn from the past, history is doomed to repeat itself. So this is my short presentation. I hope it was short. There was no timing. So thank you for the attention. And I'm open to receive feedback, ideas, and of course, I'm very interested to hear what would you do to empower the communities? Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Laura. Thanks for sharing all of that. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, I encourage you to write them down at this point. It was a great presentation, but it did run over by a few minutes. So we'll see if we have time for the questions or commentary on. That's all right. It happens. You're excited about your project, and that's awesome to see with Relief Connect. But we did hit the 15-minute mark with that presentation, but thank you very much. So again, if you have any thoughts, if you have any ideas, feel free to write them down. We'll also have the contact information for the speakers available after the session if you want to reach out afterwards. But thank you so much for presenting. Our next presenter is here in the room with us, and so you'll have a chance to speak. Did you have anything you wanted to show on the screen today? No, just wanted to speak. All right, well, we can get the camera focused on over there.
So
feel free to start.
Can I have everyone put their hand up if they can think of misinformation or disinformation that has affected a political context? You can think of any misinformation, disinformation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, keep your hand up if you can think of misinformation and disinformation that has affected humanitarian operations. Okay, those of you with your hands up, I need your contact information.
Spot.
So, I mean, I've already noticed 3 themes running through the conference in this last day, which are relevant to what I want to talk about. One is that although this is a professional conference, there's still an extraordinary idealism and desire to help in many, if not all, the people here. And this desire to reach out to connect, it's so present, and there are so many ways presented on how to enact those desires. The second thing is that as a sector, we're starting to grow beyond our origins, our original mandates. And we're starting to butt up against issues of power. We want to give affected populations a seat at the table, but actually, why do we get to give a seat at the table? Because as my former boss at HH so eloquently put it It's their fucking table. So I have an interest in people. Actually, what I find is everyone has an interest in people, right? Like, don't you? But if you're at a dinner party and you say you're in grad school studying anthropology, actually, we're not often at dinner parties because we're in grad school, but who can afford to host a dinner party anyways? But if you're lucky and someone invites you down the hall in the student residence and you're handed a Feldschlossen and some crushed tortilla chips that are somehow moist, and you complain, you never ask back curiously. But anyways, that's weird to me. But if you're invited to a dinner party, say outside the student dorms, and someone asks, what do you do? And you say you study anthropology, you can see the blood run from their face. They're like, oh my God, why me? I've got to talk to someone who's so bad at socializing that they're taking courses in it. So, but if you ask about information, or better yet, conspiracy, they pin you to the wall because it's one of those things that goes deep with people, right? It's like religion or money. It's one of those things. And so I have a big interest in rumors and conspiracies and what people think and believe and why. And I think we all do. We have a huge vested interest in it because, again, information is about what we believe in, these convictions. They're meant to take us into the future that we can't quite grasp. In January, the World Economic Forum released a report showing that 1,490 international experts rated misinformation and disinformation the leading global risk in the next 2 years, surpassing war, migration, climate catastrophe. Nobody really knows, despite all the expertise that'll be on parade in the next 4 days, how others will think or what they'll believe in 2 years' time, which is disconcerting to humanitarians since we're meant to be building accountability between ourselves and these beneficiaries, users, stakeholders, affected populations, which I find they're all a bit dehumanizing somehow. They're people in the end, and we're meant to be building trust with them, for them. So the third part of this, like we said, as humanitarians, we've all agreed on the really critical importance of trust, which means, in a sense, alleviating human suffering requires a constant effort of impression management with affected populations. I mean, how many of these discussions these weeks are about building trust? It's an obsession. It's an exceptional tidal wave of interest. And I think it's not, so to speak, so strange that humanitarians who operate in contexts where we feel relatively powerless are increasingly preoccupied with earning and regaining trust because it's an active process rather than a stable outcome, one that everyone says is slowly gained and quickly lost. So how is this related to misinformation? Well, my contention is that with the debunking campaigns that many are running, we're losing trust. And yesterday, a panelist said there's nothing worse for trust than being asked for your opinion, your insight, and then being ignored. And we often squander the insights of our interlocutors pretty ruthlessly. So most approaches to misinformation, both in academia and here in humanitarianism, in the real world, I guess, operates in classic truth versus false dichotomies. And anthropologists have long understood or long criticized this dualism as representing a simplistic understanding of the world. Via these definitions, misinformation, its wrongness, is thought of as being in need of being identified, combated, and deleted. And there's a way of using misinformation to truly understand the intricacies of relationships between people and about how to right power imbalances. Anthropologists have long studied magic, witchcraft, sorcery, these things as integral parts of societies. Among the Azande of Central Africa, Edward Stevens Pritchard, back in the 1930s, famously wrote about how magic is used to make sense of events that cannot be controlled. He wrote about how things appearing irrational to Westerners' eyes made sense when put back in their social context. We, anthropologists and largely Westerners, have studied forms of dubious narratives, such as rumors, gossips, and scandals, to reveal the inner working of social relations. We can use these perspectives to think about how fake stories function to reveal social discontent. We have the building blocks for a more robust understanding of misinformation by underscoring the importance of contextualized analysis and that porous demarcation between truth and falsity. So my thesis supervisor, Julie, published a great story recently. I love telling it, of her experience studying the ICRC's trust building practices in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. When they weren't traveling by air fleet, Julie was putting behind the delegates on a little white motorbike, pulling off to write field notes. And one day she wrote in her notebook, Why do aid programs so often spark conspiracy theories in the local settings where they're deployed, even if their explicit objective is to respond to local urgent needs? So she wrote these questions after local ICRC employees told her several times that the presence of foreign delegates created a sense of unease among villagers. Seeing these vehicles, the air fleets or the white motorbikes, which are almost exclusively reserved to those in positions of power, elicited paranoid thoughts about white men coming to spy. On another occasion, on her arrival in a settlement of recently displaced persons, Julie was told to hide her white motorbike helmet. Its color is apparently reminiscent of colonial headgear. The helmet was also believed to have a magic power of recording conversations even when white people were not around. This is not irrational. These rumors represent intimate personal experiences as well as powerful commentary about the privileges associated with whiteness. False stories of white men coming to spy are tinged with truth, since they remind people of real experiences of white colonists seeking to control territories and people. These stories highlight the tenuousness of trust towards familiar strangers, humanitarians, among populations. Julie and her suspicion, the suspicion that she and her helmet elicit, are entangled with political histories and geographies of imperialism. It's a story repeated often. I can give you a similar example from Didier Fasson, an anthropologist who looked into the South African government and how they responded to the AIDS crisis post-apartheid. He found that the initial rejection of AIDS treatments by African National Congress leaders was deeply rooted in the historic context of colonial public health practices. Conspiracy theories saying that the AIDS epidemic and its treatments were part of a plot to eradicate the Black population. And these show how paranoid social thought around AIDS in South Africa is deeply colored by memories of the past, which then feed anxieties towards Western modes of treatments on Africans. South African suspicion towards Western science and biomedicine can't be summed up by culturalist explanations. They should be understood in light of embodied memories of racial segregation, political oppression, and racist stereotypes about African sexuality. So I've come to appreciate these kinds of conspiracy theories as a practical logic of engagement with the Mapa, which I'm totally butchering in its pronunciation, but it's a Swahili word for disaster or great tragedy. Mapa is used to talk about the history and ongoing effects of slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism. This kind of misinformation can coalesce with other post-colonial critiques to become truth claims that demand reparations and redistributive justice. In our attempts to build trust, let's stop hiding behind so-called scientific objectivity to perpetuate dependency, exploitation, racism, elitism, and colonialism. Instead, start thinking more critically about how we can start trusting people back. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Thoughts, questions, comments, inspirations?
Well, I am inspired, so it's a good start.
I mean, I had some goosebumps during one of the stories that you were telling. I know my dad's family comes from the Congo, and we're always struggling with these different ways of seeing the world when we go visit as a family, because you have, as the European and whiter side of the family, you have these issues. And I guess one of the questions that I'd have on this is, have you or your thesis supervisor talked about how you actually approach and integrate these stories and these beliefs into what could be proposed to be a quantitative analysis of a population? If we're using, for example, like Relief Connect, right? You get data, you put it in, right? How do you actually merge the anthropological approach with this like quantitative data collection approach?
Quantitative is not my forte, but I think this is the goal of my thesis project, is to talk to humanitarians about how they could integrate different understandings of rumor, especially, into their trust building exercises. So because of that, it's difficult for me to understand the quantitative side of like humanitarian logistics and precisely how those key into issues of trust. But it's something I look forward to working on. I think probably something that you could quantify is talking to people about their, say, voting tendencies if you're in a democracy, or approval rating, sentiment analyses, those kinds of things can all be quantified.
Right.
And then potentially trying to triangulate that quantitative data with understandings of political context, of historical context. I think a big part of it is looking at variables that have been quantified and trying to see patterns between the different things that are being quantified. So I don't know, vaccine rates and approval of, I don't know, local government or something like that. And you could start to create some interesting theories just by looking at things that don't seem to make sense.
Sure.
But generally, I would say that quantification is often our problem.
Yeah, I was curious about is how you actually merge this
Yeah.
very fluid concepts of like
Yeah.
rumor, conspiracy, and belief. It's like that. Yeah, go ahead, speak freely. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for this excellent, thought-provoking input. I was thinking where to start because there are so many things that came to my mind, but maybe the easiest is that to mention two things. First of all, this is definitely getting of increasing importance for all sort of humanitarian operations, but also for science. Yeah, because very often you still have scientists coming from Europe, going to Africa, to Asia, to South America. And you see the same with humanitarians going into the same regions. And some of them have been working there, developed a kind of regional understanding. And despite all these initiatives of localization, contextualization, you still have huge gaps. And they are still very much originating in the local beliefs, the spiritual level that most likely we will never touch upon. So it is so tremendously important that we integrate that knowledge with people from the region who can work with the same scientific instruments that we employ. And this is my second point. I would like to interrelate you to colleagues from Durban University, from the African Center for the Integration of Indigenous Knowledge. And they do exactly what you are describing in a systematic scientific way to, first of all, capture these that wisdom that is embedded in local communities and societies, but which is not written down, obviously. Yeah, this is just handed over by mouth spelling. Still to have an opportunity to capture it for next generations. That is their approach. Let it be in the form of songs, in writings or whatsoever, and even to take it to the digital level if the communities allow that. So in short, it's really to my mind, to what I know, first approach really to capture this knowledge in a systematic way. And it goes across Africa because they work with a lot of universities in different countries. So happy to connect you, and
yeah, that would be great.
That this would also support your master.
Thank you. On the point of science, I think it's a really good point. And a lot of people actually blame this post-truth world that we're living in on anthropologists and sociologists and what they call the science world and science world in the 90s, introducing the idea that postmodern era where there is no objective truth. And I would actually refute that that's not what's happening. Instead, what's happening is these are issues of power that we're facing. This is why we have contested epistemologies. I am absolutely pro-science. And I do think that vaccine hesitancy is a problem, but I also think that it's a problem to control populations that don't want to be controlled. The issues of neocolonialism, of refuting sovereignty is an issue. So these are complicated things that have to be treated with a lot of delicacy. In terms of indigenous knowledge, again, it just comes back to power, I think. But there is a lot of embedded wisdom, obviously, that is compatible with humanitarian operations. Like in the Congo, I know that there are still folk songs being sung about sleeping sickness and how, I think it was the British and the French across East Africa and Central Africa in the 30s, I want to say, were treating sleeping sickness, which is a fly-borne disease. And the medication that they were using had horrendous side effects. And they were really using the medication as a system of control over people. And there are still songs that might not necessarily describe the medication or sleeping sickness itself, but talk about taking something that's supposed to heal you and ultimately hurting you. And so paying attention to these forms of knowledge which are embedded in culture and in songs will absolutely help repair relationships, especially when you're trying to help people.
We'll take one final question online. I see that Laura has her hand up.
Yes, hi. I find it so interesting that, you know, for my project, I actually came from a perspective how technically we can help um, perpetuate this communication with communities, how to make it better. However, I also ended up, you know, coming to the conclusion that the end goal is to really enhance the trust of the people that are there, you know, the locals during the disaster. And one way to do that is to tackle exactly, essentially what you're talking about, this white saviorism issue, which is people coming to them and pretending like they know everything. So that's why I thought that one of the solutions might be to give the decision-making power more onto the locals. So I also, another thought that I had was about the private corporations who essentially also establish this mistrust in the communities. For example, with the contraceptive pills, the history on that. Also, another story that I read recently was about powdered milk for infants that they provided as a solution. However, the more powdered milk you use, the less naturally you can produce milk. So in a way, now us as humanitarians, we're left to solve these issues, you know, by ourselves. So your topic is for sure like super thought-provoking, and I really appreciate your perspective on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. If you have any further questions or comments, write them down, put them in an email.
Yeah,
Find you after you'll be around. But unfortunately, we do need to move on to the next topic. We have about 40 minutes left and about 4 people left to do things. So we'll make it work.
The engineer in me says that fits perfectly.
Right? And the anthropologist would probably say not so much. We'll see what we can do. And of course, these conversations can continue outside of this session as well. But now I would like to ask Marcia and Ayosha, who's online, to see how you want to share. And if we actually, if one of you could switch seats with Marcia so that she could be seen in the camera.
So the thing is, when the music stops, you should have.
Yeah. And Ayosha, would you like to share online or would you like me to share from here? I have a presentation here.
I think Marcia wanted to.
Yeah, I have.
Yes, Kieto is going to share.
And presentation here.
So this will more of a practical presentation, less than a.
Yeah, but that's the nice thing about this like open session, right? That was the whole setup is you talk about whatever, whether it's technical, principle based or like critical reflection, you know.
True.
Keeps people also more switching between different forms and different types of presentations.
Okay. So this is a hybrid presentation because I'm presenting here from this place to you, and Ayosha is presenting from Germany. So we connected through an email that Ayosha sent to I don't know how many people, where he asked, do people know other humanitarians working at the response in Turkey? And I thought, I'm doing a master thesis about that. So that's how we connected and we decided to do this presentation together. So I'm Martje and my focus in my thesis is on the incorporation of sanitation needs of people with physical disabilities in the response and recovery efforts after the earthquakes in Turkey. And Ayosha, I will let you introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Ayosha and I'm focusing on spontaneous volunteering in response to the 2023 earthquake disaster.
Yes, perfect. So to give you some basic information about the response, because not everyone was involved, of course, I switch to the next one. Oh, first the content. Well, I will give some background information, then Alyosha gives a short presentation about his thesis. I will give a short presentation about mine, and then we have a scenario exercise for you guys. So some background information, facts and figures. So last year on the 6th of February at 4:17 in the morning, to be very exact, we had an earthquake of a 7.7 magnitude. And then after that, there were multiple aftershocks. And then later that day, there was a huge other earthquake, a magnitude of 6.7. This gave a lot of destruction in the area. 10 provinces were affected, and in those provinces, 13.5 million people are living there. So you can imagine that the impact was very, very big. Yeah, there are a lot of numbers around. We put these numbers up, but I do have to say that we don't know if these numbers are correct. So if we talk about misinformation, then yeah, I do want to give that disclaimer. These are the numbers of the Ministry of Interior. Yeah, and yeah, to give like a sort of another number, 3 million people were displaced. So if we talk about shelter, then that's a big number to have in mind. And then after the earthquakes, we call it a humanitarian circus came around. And the whole cluster system was not really officially approved, but they were there and it was accepted that they worked there. And I think that is the big background information that you need for our presentations. Thank you. Let's see if it works. Cool. Alyosha, take the floor.
Yes, thank you, Martia. So on the 6th of February, I was actually not far from where you are right now. And because it was supposed to be my first day with the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, and I heard of this in the radio before I was on my way to work. And I had a steep learning curve in the next days and weeks, as you can imagine. And I witnessed firsthand pretty much how all the humanitarian professionals rushed to meet the needs. I have to say, Turkish Red Crescent did an amazing job. My IFRC colleagues did their very, very best. But when I came home after those quite long days and looked at my phone, I saw many messages of friends in Turkey asking me, what can we do? We heard of this earthquake. We need to do something. And it was clear for them, not doing anything is not an option. And in the weeks and months that followed, they truly did impressive things. The civil society was amazing. But for this, I think you need to read my entire thesis. So next slide, please. So those people who haven't been formally associated with a disaster management agency before are called spontaneous volunteers. And they are active before, during, and after disasters, as individuals or as part of groups. And they engage in a variety of activities, which is actually very, very interesting. And throughout the disaster management cycle. And as there's a little bit empirical research out there, and it has shown that the contributions of them are significant. In the case of earthquakes, up to 90% of people getting out of the rubble with the help of spontaneous volunteers, which is a big number. But research really has just started on this issue of spontaneous volunteering and has mainly focused so far on global north countries. So I thought, okay, I need to have a look at Turkey. Next slide, please. So I have developed 3 questions, basically. I want to find out what factors do enable this co-production of disaster relief by spontaneous volunteers. I want to find out what structures do they build while volunteering, and how do they interact with us, with the professional disaster relief workers. And for this, I did, of course, literature research. I did so far 34 key informant interviews with disaster management professionals, but also mainly with spontaneous volunteers. And I'm currently also doing an online survey with spontaneous volunteers. And I'm in the mid of data analysis right now. So what I'm showing you now is just a snapshot of what I saw so far. Next slide, please. So starting with the enabling factors, compassion and solidarity with the fellow citizens was basically exclusively named as the motivating factor to engage. But also people were feeling there was not enough help. Maybe they were also feeling the scale of the disaster was way too big for professionals to meet all the needs. And when they engaged, they used existing relationships. They are organized in their university or in a political party they were in, a union, association, a sport club. And they really built on those existing structures. And they added to all areas of the response, from needs assessment, search and rescue, food distribution, logistics, child-friendly spaces, all of that. Super, super interesting. And they quickly established or reorganized their existing structures to meet the needs of disaster relief, and invented stuff, which is always my favorite example is a group of food delivery drivers, and they usually do that in Turkey with motorbikes. And they've heard that many streets are destroyed and big cars and trucks can't pass. So they had the idea, okay, we go there into the region with our motorbikes, and maybe we can go through the narrow streets or the blocked streets and make sure that all food and essentials getting to everyone, which was very inspiring. And of course, there's already cooperation between different actors, between the volunteer groups, but also between volunteer groups and disaster relief professionals. But it's pretty informal so far. The structures are not really there yet. And the spontaneous volunteers and the disaster management professionals really very much agree that we need to work on that. We need to improve the collaboration. And I want to underline one final thing here. Spontaneous volunteers, they want to be part of the team. They don't say like, oh, usually the professionals do everything and we just do it because the professionals are doing it. No, they want to be part of the team. They want to see leadership, they want to see cooperation, they want to see coordination, but really they want to be involved. And this is, I think, when there's one take-home message today, then it is that. But for all the other information, you have to reach me later. And now we go over to Mark here with an at least equally exciting topic.
Thank you, Alyosha. Yeah, I also want to share that we are both in the data gathering and analysis phases of our thesis. So what we're sharing is really the first results in a sense. So, okay, my thesis, as I said, is on the incorporation of sanitation needs of people with physical disabilities. And how did I find out about this topic is because one of my former professors comes from the area, from Hatay province, and she was telling about a family member who was in a wheelchair, and she was living really just in a mountain area with no family members around. And after the earthquake, she was sort of left by herself. And then I started digging into this topic, and I started to connect it to my master, and started to connect it to WASH. And I found out that people with disabilities in humanitarian crisis are 2 to 4 times more at risk of that compared to the rest of the population. And besides that, people with disabilities are often excluded from decision-making processes and leadership opportunities. And that's where it's sort of clicked for me. I wanted to find out, okay, if there's an incorporation of sanitation needs, how does that interaction then works? Do people talk to people with disabilities themselves? Do they talk to caregivers? Who do they talk to? Who sits at the table? So the research setup, I had 2 research objectives. So firstly assess the extent to which the sanitation needs of individuals with physical disabilities in Hatay province were addressed by 8 initiatives. And secondly, provide insights to enhance this topic. And this topic will be inclusivity and effectiveness. So the methodology, I'm just doing semi-structured interviews with a lot of people, with all the stakeholders that are on the screen. At the moment, I did 16 interviews with international organizations who were there after the earthquake, so either in the response or recovery phase. And next week or the week after, if I get all my permissions, I will go to Turkey myself and talk to local organizations, people with disabilities themselves, caregivers. And to do that, I'm working together with the university in the area, so Mustafa Kemal University, and this is my research in a sense, but it's also theirs. The data is theirs. I'm working together with their students, and I really see knowledge not as a universal thing. So knowledge is situated, and the knowledge that is there is also important to stay there and have an influence and impact in the area. So I will do semi-structured interviews and observations in the area. So first results, yeah, this is very small, I see. But what you see here are sort of the layers of humanitarian interaction in the response phase. And if I define response, I'm talking about the first months after the earthquakes. And what you see here are the layers of interaction. So in the middle, you see the people with disabilities, physical disabilities in this research. And then you see the different layers, and the further away, the less contact they had with people with disabilities. The local coordination mechanism is besides, because I'm still trying to find out and triangulate where they fit into these layers. And what I'm trying to do now is talking to people who were there or are there, and talking about the interaction between those layers, and also if this is correct, because I heard this because of all the interviews I did, but does it really fit the view of all the actors in a sense? So questions now are the circles perceived in the same way by all the stakeholders? How do the stakeholders draw the interaction lines? And what is the result of this interaction on the incorporation of sanitation needs? Okay, time for a little exercise.
Yes. We probably have to hurry up a little bit, but we developed a little scenario, and maybe you can jump right into it. So the scenario is as followed: there's a city, there's flooding, and it's your city, it's your neighborhood, and you know that there is a residence nearby for people with disabilities, where people live independently, kind of. You know, probably electricity problems, heating problems, maybe you don't really know what's going on there, but you decide you want to do something. And we would be interested, brainstorm a little. What would you do first if you would hear about this, from your perspective, from your neighborhood?
Someone first thoughts. Also for the online people.
First, try to establish a line of communication.
Line of communication, okay. Do you have something specific in mind?
Phone call.
Phone call, okay.
I would start looking at who could help to just, if I'm thinking about my own city, there's a scouts group nearby. You know, I would check if there's like resources we could mobilize to make this happen.
From my first responder training out, I'll check to make sure that I'm doing okay first, that I can actually help. Check that my apartment is doing all right, that I have food so that I can actually help other people.
Okay.
I'd also say check like if it's an apartment building, see if like the bottom stories are flooded and like if you have to help your neighbors first, and then you can start helping like in the surrounding areas as well, especially like as you said, through a phone call, and then maybe like they have more contact with one another if you're not in high contact with people then. And maybe able to help each other or ask each other what is needed, and then worst case you can also go out and bring something, but that depends on how bad the flooding is as well.
Actually, as an information manager, I want to reverse my answer. I will Google how many rooms are in the building, how many people are there, how far is it?
Okay.
Try to find out, do some situational analysis.
Okay.
This is a question also, what is the status of the people there under standard working conditions? If it's if with disabilities, if it's a residence where everybody is deaf, for example, you might have less luck with a phone call than you would if you went to the door, for example.
Yeah.
If people online, you can just unmute or raise your hand if you want to speak.
Because if you do you guys know your neighbors? Like put your hand up. Do you know your neighbors?
Tried.
Yeah. Because that also influences what you're doing, right? Because if you know that your neighbor is an old lady, 85, and not that good at walking on her own, then you have a different need in mind. Yeah. Oyosha, what would you do?
I really like the idea of the scouts nearby. So I would, of course, I think I have a WhatsApp group with many university friends, and I would try to team up with them and say like, oh, maybe let's do something. Let's check out if the people are all right.
How about you, Marcia?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was in a lot of like first aid situation the last couple of weeks. I don't know why, but and then I'm the one mobilizing people. But I am wondering what I would do if there's no internet, for example, or if the cell phone lines are off. Then it's a whole different situation again. But it is an asset if you know your neighbors and if you also know if they are home, for example.
How do you integrate new technology in these kinds of scenarios? There are technologies, useful and effective technology in this case, in this kind of emergencies, like the DUC initiative from some guys from the old project.
I'm also thinking about Facebook also has a function, right? To say
what if the connection doesn't work?
Yeah.
That's why you need to, in my opinion, use some technology that consider this kind. I mean, all the solution we have mentioned are with some kind of connection, and it's especially in floods. It's not always the case. So in this case, especially with, I don't see the spontaneous volunteers only as a positive things, because they create a lot of problem for the coordination, and I made my PhD on that. But you need to integrate also something that and teach people how to use some kind of technology. For those who know, the DUC technology is like dropping from the sky some rubber. They're called DUCs because they are rubber kind of modem that creates a mesh network communication system, and then you can communicate with people using it like a very simple chat, using like the mesh network that works with the Bluetooth and bounce the messages. And I don't think spontaneous volunteers can do everything by themselves if they're not supported. And again, they can be quite problematic as well. So it's not only pros and cons.
Yeah.
Final comments.
I
think we want to have.
I'd probably gather them. As said, the common rooms aren't used, but if they're accessible, I think it's good to get everyone together, see what everyone actually has in terms of resources. Maybe one person has toilet paper, another has this type of food, this one has drinks, and then and I think strength in numbers is also like gives everyone maybe a clear mental situation.
We have a lot of
I
hands up.
And someone
online. We'll take an online comment. Then we're gonna have to.
Sorry, I just don't see everyone. No, Essentially, I think like the first thing as a person that just wants to help on the whim is to first make sure what actions are being taken on a higher level to help those people, because after all, you're one person and you need to make sure that your efforts are indeed going to actually help instead of impede the rescue efforts. So I would probably just start with that before taking any way that I could help myself. Just make sure that help is on the way. And probably because it says here that it's residence for people with disabilities, so I guess it's assigned by someone, either a corporation or the government. There is someone that's responsible for that building, and they will probably already be on the way with some sort of help. And you just need to make sure that you don't stand in the way of it, but you actually help.
We're gonna have to move on.
Yes, thank you all so much. I think I'm speaking also on behalf of Ayosha to say that it was also nice to present in this kind of stage of our theses. And if you guys have questions or ideas or input, please do feel free to contact us. Yeah.
Just quick comment.
Sure, while I'm setting up if you want.
I didn't introduce myself. My name is Akif, and I am also from Germany, and I'm writing my thesis on this issue as well. And
Wow.
first, yes, when I see that topic, I saw that. I thought
about volunteer.
No, about Kahramanmaraş earthquake and the responses from the Germany and diaspora organizations about this issue. And I worked as a field coordinator with Kahramanmaraş, and I lived there almost 4 months from the beginning. I mean, the second day of the earthquake till I think almost 4 or 5 months I lived there. So when I see that issue, and I felt like my thesis topic is like stolen. And secondly, I also thank you. Sorry, I couldn't read your name, but Ayosha, thank you very much, because I am also one of the founder of the Turkish Red Crescent Youth Organization.
Awesome.
So I've been managing that Turkish Red Crescent Youth and volunteers, all this movement, and even also during the Kahramanmaraş earthquake. So when I saw that issue, I also felt like very proud, and I immediately texted my colleagues and said, "Yeah, look, guys, I mean, someone is talking about you." So thank you very much for bringing that topic. Yes, and then
Sounds like this is not the last time you'll be talking.
and I am also I am also living in Germany, so you are from Germany, I guess.
Perfect.
So we can talk further after this session. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Happy to connect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you everyone for taking part. In our last 10 minutes, we have the last two conversations. If you do need to head out at some point, feel free. But the last two presentations or conversations that we have going on are a lot more on the theoretical lens. I really appreciate all of the research and sharing that's been done so far. And now I'd like to invite my friend Gabby, who is signed in online, Gabby Martinez. You were not here in the beginning to introduce yourself because the East Coast time makes HNPW a little rough to get to, but I really appreciate you joining us here today. Could you please introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Oh my goodness. Hi, I'm Gabby. I am the Senior Assistant Director of Major Gifts for the University of Chicago, and I live in New Jersey and work in New York.
Great. Well, Gabby and I have been friends for a long time. We knew each other back in middle school, and so we've back in middle school. You kind of don't know what you're doing. Oh, can you turn the camera, Kelby, to see me so she can just see you? Back in middle school, you don't know what you're doing, and then we were having a conversation a few weeks ago about going to this conference and having a session for next humanitarians. We were talking a little bit about the work we do, and so I thought I wanted to bring up this conversation that we had and ask this question to each other and also get input from anyone here. But Gabby works with U Chicago, working with major donors, working with big gifts and philanthropists. So I was curious, like, how do you see yourself as a humanitarian when this is a role that traditionally isn't heavily represented in these kinds of rooms?
I hate that suit.
Thanks.
So hold on, I had a whole thing going. So I started college with the idea that I wanted to be a rights activist, right? But that I have the privilege of education, so maybe I can start helping more people with a law degree. I started studying political science and cultural anthropology with this nebulous idea of maybe understanding people and policy will help me with this goal of helping people. But while I was at college, like a lot of my friends, I had to work to pay rent, utilities, groceries, that kind of thing to live. So I spent almost all of my time at the Rutgers Telefund. Were those students who call alumni for $25 donations. And okay, sorry. Were those people who call for $25 donations. And that is really where I started my career and where my passion for helping students not have to focus on work while at college comes from. By my senior year, I was hired by the Rutgers Senior Class Gift Campaign, the goal of which was to empower students to give back to things that made an impact for them at the school. No donating a bench for the class of 2020, we raised $40,000 towards various scholarships and programs at the school. And it would have been more if not for 2020. And after graduating, I still had rent to pay and now student loans to deal with. And the law school was just another expense on top of that. So, thanks to my work experience, I was able to land a job at a small New Jersey-based nonprofit and then use it to pivot back into higher education philanthropy at the University of Chicago. I currently work with philanthropists that give in the 100,000 to 4.9 million range. These donors make huge impacts at the university, and I have the pleasure of working with them to direct support towards where it's needed most. I take a tremendous amount of pride in our Odyssey Scholarship Program because it doesn't just give tuition, room, and board. It's an all-encompassing program, meaning if a student needs a good winter coat, wants to study abroad, needs books, or a paid internship, Odyssey covers all of those costs and has all those resources. And so my idea on how to help people may have changed, but I've been gathering a skill set to make the biggest impact I can given my situation. And that is how I consider myself a humanitarian. Now, I have a question for Cato. Cato, you were raised in the United States, and as you know, we have big problems over here. Making education accessible is just one of them. How do you make your biggest impact as a humanitarian living in Finland?
Yeah, this was a very tough question that we've considered. And I think one of the common themes in the humanitarian world is people want to make an impact and have a positive effect in some way. And I constantly think about this question myself. I grew up in the US. I grew up in culturally American, although neither of my parents grew up there. And it was, is this the space where I can make the greatest impact, or is it going to be somewhere else? And that was through the end of COVID was when I started looking at exactly where I wanted to find myself. And so then I looked at, do I want to go directly to the practice and try to go into the field and try my hand at actually helping people? And I thought about it, and I was like, I wouldn't know where to go. I mean, you see the news, you see people in like desert landscapes helping people. But I was like, I don't know how to do that. And so that's when I decided to find a master's program. I've always had a little bit of a global mindset, and I've always found that US aid and US focused support is very US centric. So that's one of the reasons I left, is to do my master's in Finland instead, because I suspected it would give me a greater global perspective. And it has, but it's also made me realize a little bit of how different the US sees humanitarian work. And the example that we've talked about in the past, or I've talked about with Gabby, is this concept like you don't other than like Katrina, I think, you don't really see UN blue caps, anyone in the US operating in extremely impoverished areas, even though the need in certain parts of the US are just as great as other parts of the world. Right? And so it's this question of how does humanitarianism exist in a different lens in the US? And so that's when we were talking about this, it's this question that I'll send back to Gabby, is I haven't figured it out yet, but it seems like you have a way, because you work with people of high impact philanthropists who are giving, and those funds that are helping students, they're helping communities, they're helping people who would not have access, who are in need in certain ways. But they don't have this like impartiality, humanity. Like they don't have the context that we have here. They don't have a UN mandate, but they're still giving, right? They're still trying to help their communities. What do you see as the different motivations for doing that in the US context?
I think the US philanthropists kind of get a bad name. We kind of call them tax break philanthropists. And, you know, that is a good criticism of the motivation. But philanthropists at the end of the day, they want to give back to their community. And those for whom tax breaks are a motivator, doesn't last long when I ask them about their passion and what change they want to see in the world and how they and work with them to actually make that impact. Everybody has some sort of thing that they want to do. And it just needs to be connected back to a community, an idea, an identity. So sometimes I do that with philanthropists, with students, and they remember how they were trying to like either get a job or do anything at the university level. Sometimes it's areas of research and or change on the local level. How does giving back to a business school change anything on a local level? I direct people towards certain things that might inspire them. So I think a huge thing is social impact research. I think social impact research and activism go hand in hand. And my role, I see my role as educating philanthropists on these things, on these issues and topics, based off of their interests and their passions. And you, unfortunately, I hate to be the US in this conversation, but you need the money piece when you don't have a government that is very supportive on social issues. So it all works in tandem. I think we just need to work on figuring out how to do everything together better while still staying critical of all of these issues. The anthropologist in me never dies. So
Everything together better. That's a pretty good motto, right?
yeah.
A final comment I had on this concept, and if anyone else has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or a comment on this dynamic between philanthropy and humanitarian work. Is one of the big themes we have here is localization. That's like huge. It's already come up here a few times. It came up in the opening speech. Everyone's like, oh, we're gonna work with local communities. And I think the US is a pretty unique space for aiding a local community because you have so many stratas of income and ability and financial capacity in a community where I think you were talking the other day about donors who, although they didn't go to UChicago, they liked what like their kids were involved in, and they were able to support the community because they had an exposure to it and were able to give and make a difference in that way and impact that community. Do you see that happening a lot as like this alternative? You're saying that you have a federal government that doesn't do as much, but now you have the communities themselves figuring out ways to cross those social strata to try to make that difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at the activism in universities on Gaza. The activism that's happening now, they're starting to cross strategies where my little cousin is doing an encampment, and I promise this has to do with philanthropy, but they're getting not just the universities together, but organizations on the ground together to do these encampments and things like that. So universities on the US are the spaces where we have these communities of support and like a walkable city, like tiny little walkable cities. And it's not as accessible everywhere else in the US, but universities are like a big, big place where community is made in the US, and one of the only places, I'll argue, where universities are made, because we're not very meet your neighbors friendly. I mean, I'm in the New Jersey, New York area, so that's anyway. There are ways where we're starting to go hand in hand and going together to do these things. I'm seeing a hand raised though, so please interrupt me because I've lost the thread.
Ayush, I see you with a raised hand.
No, very, very interesting. And I think it's a super relevant topic. And to like bring it from the US and a little bit to other countries as well. I mean, the issue of protracted crisis is a big issue. The big majority of humanitarian crises are protracted these days. And the problem with foreign money is it's foreign, right? And when suddenly donor government or a big Western donor decides to cut the money, this really creates big problems on the ground. And I had the pleasure of doing a little bit of a study on the whole issue of protracted crisis. And one thing which came up frequently is also to enable to localize fundraising and to use local philanthropy schemes, or so to say, to really make sure that the money is there for programs in the long term, because that's what we need. We need to come from to treat symptoms to really do like the long-term vision. And I think that's why it's an important topic. And yeah, money unfortunately rules many things.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, we also recognize that not everywhere has the capacity to have local philanthropists, right? That is also one of the issues we work with. But in the places that it does, you have potential for that kind of impact. Final question, comment on this topic?
Wondering how can we apply models of philanthropy to humanitarianism, and should we? And it's interesting because it kind of elicits ideas about cash-based transfers, and it also makes me laugh a little bit because I'm imagining like Finns and Danes coming to the US to help create humanitarian programs for the poor American kids who can't afford college. So this language around humanitarianism and the right or the need to intervene is really interesting. But yes, should we apply models of philanthropy to humanitarianism? Does that imply some kind of hands-off approach?
I don't think it's hands-off at all. I don't think it would be a hands-off approach. We at Telefund, for example, we're asking for $5 donations. We're asking for $25 donations. We're calling the local community, or our community, our alumni community. And I think there are ways where some of the things that we do in fundraising to start from the ground up can help with the localization problem. Because if you're teaching people how to call to ask people what they need or whatever it is, it could make a better conversation between the local population and the actual big organizations. I work currently with the big donors, but I will never discount a $25 donation or a $5 monthly donation, because the people that give those donations are often the people who that $5 or $25 is a lot more than $100,000 is to another person. So we definitely have the problem where we have a lot of people with a lot of money that get to decide where they want it to go, and the government who decides that they want it to go to the military. So there are criticisms here, and I think we have a lot to learn about the humanitarian world and how we can sort of bridge the gap between the two, philanthropy and humanitarianism, because they're very similar things.
Well, thanks so much for calling in, Gabby. I really appreciate you joining us and bringing another perspective on the humanitarian environment. We are currently running over, and I apologize for that if you were trying to run off to something. Our last conversation that we were going to have is with Rigmor here. And I understand if you do need to run away because you have something to get off to, but I would love to hear some insights from anyone who's willing to lend their brain and their thoughts to some of the questions that Rigmor has here today.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Should I sit over there?
Yes, we could switch.
Yeah, that's a bit easy.
Right. Right. So first I want to say on Thursday, for those of you who were here, we had an event on humanitarian at the ACAP's office.
on how to become effective change agents. And it's going to be a conversation between experienced humanitarians and then next generation humanitarians. And for those online as well, if you are interested in the discussion, I'll share my contact details, and you can send me some questions that you have in this area of how to do better as the next generation of humanitarians. And then we will launch it as a podcast episode. So maybe you can
When is
engage.
this?
That's on Thursday night.
Thursday night.
Yeah.
Where?
It's at the not far 1 kilometer from here. Pickups office. I can share the details.
Okay.
Yeah. And then mostly it's actually I haven't prepared a speech, but I kind of want to tell a little bit about the background for this conversation that we're gonna have on Thursday, and a lot of the stuff that you have said today is talking into that. So Laura, Ila, you spoke a lot about trust and passion, and also the genuine interest in people versus money as a driving force. And Gabby, you spoke a little bit about philanthropies and how again, what is the driving force behind? And I have in the sector as well experienced already that we have kind of normalized that we can say one thing, but in fact we know, and we have normalized that it's another thing that is the driving force behind. And I've tried myself actually already to be part of some kind of funding negotiation meetings, let's say, where we spoke about, we were quite aligned in our goals and our what we wish to in this initiative for the sector. And I was like, okay, cool. It's about how to move on with the sector. It's about how do we stop being a bit colonial? How do we actually, all of the things we're talking about regarding things, how do we actually see, how can we move forward and actually see it happen? Because we talk a lot about it. And we were quite aligned, and we were discussing this initiative. And then, at some point, we said like, okay, so if we understand it right, then this is more or less what is going to happen. And we're kind of looking forward to the conclusion of this very, very interesting initiative. And those donors and funders, they were like, yeah, they're saying, I was like, what is this? Like, what do you mean with this? Can you elaborate on this thing you're doing there? And this thing apparently meant that like the conclusion should be them, basically, that the results should be, of course, them. So it was all about, again, self-promotion, self-interest. Luckily, my colleagues as well fought over my dead body. That's not gonna happen. But it's quite, I saw that for the first time, like the audacity to tell the world that you are when in reality, you're actually, with this initiative, you're actually misleading what you're telling the world that you are. It's going to be misguiding. It's not right. And I hope we in our generation as next generation humanitarians can have these discussions a bit more and a bit more transparent. And I hope we can somehow begin to actually collectively call it out and say, we don't tolerate it, we don't accept it. And let me see. And also just on an individual level, also discuss, what makes this person be in the humanitarian sector? You're very good at negotiating, obviously. You would be amazing in doing business, but why are you in the humanitarian sector? What's your motivation to be here? So I hope we can have those kind of discussions a bit more in our generation, up in Moral Compass. And then I hope we can begin to discuss when can we call it out? When are we able to call it out and still kind of survive in our different initiatives and our careers and everything? And also to discuss in this, I hope also on Thursday, discuss in general, how do we do better? What has been normalized that we in our generation wants to unnormalize? What should we redefine as a generation? Because the areas where the big machines probably struggle a bit with or maybe a bit vague about their initiatives. How do we see this, let's say localization or another aspect? Do we want to commit to some more concrete goals? So there's actually more than just talk about it, but there's actually an actual commitment. And then also ask the question, let's say in the localization aspect, ask ourselves, okay, but if we're actually ambitious about this, and if we're actually setting this as a goal, as you know, it can also be to have XX% from the global south in leadership positions and so on. Also have the discussion that, you know, is there space for all of us here then? Or do we need some of us to have an exit plan in our career? Ask quite, I guess, fundamental questions, but if we're actually serious about this, I mean, this is what we need to talk about. So, yeah, so I hope you guys who are there and also online, if you have any questions regarding how we should do better at a next generation, then I hope you will. I think my contact details is on the screen. Yeah, thank you. And also please challenge what I say, and please, yeah, everything. So.
Thanks for sharing. That's quite a comment to say, oh, plan your exit strategy. Right? Like,
I mean,
because we talk about, I think there's there's one of the humanitarian podcasts also talks about how, yeah, when you go into an area as a humanitarian, you also want to be able to leave that space, but leaving the industry is a whole different thing, right? And I can definitely
do you need to leave? Like, I think one of the reasons that years ago we started bringing the new generation is because we feel that we did not, leave, but change and make room. Those things are not mutually exclusive, giving space, allowing people and saying, okay, then I need to leave completely. Right? I think that's one of the drivers behind this next generation is not see them as disparate things, that it's one or the other, but they need to be designed in a way that one fosters the other.
Yeah, I think we should focus on the topic next generation and leave the rest of us old ones.
Sure. Ayosha, I think you had a hand raised, but then you lowered it. Was this something you wanted to say?
No, I did the applause thing.
Oh, the applaud one. Okay, cool. Great.
Just for some clarification on this kind of bad faith that you were describing, is it mostly problems with the professionalization of the sector and balancing the interests of operating like a business and also trying to be, a charitable organization? Or is it more, is it greed, or is it
It was like, yeah, what you said about greed and money and how we can, it's also discussions about how we on an individual level can avoid if we want to be caught up by greediness and own agendas, and which questions do we need to ask ourselves on the way in our career if we want to do better. Yeah.
I worked at a humanitarian organization that said my job was as the advocacy associate, and they said we just need to, is a startup through a larger humanitarian organization. And they said, we just need to get you a seat at the table so you can advocate for us. And then I thought, okay, great, but I'm a new advocacy associate. What am I advocating for? We'll figure it out once you get there, but just advocate for getting us a seat at the table.
I do have a question about the next generation, and I don't want to get into it. We had these discussions about like age and what is the next generation, but how, like, where I fit in, probably not the next generation, but I was wondering, like, at what point do you say, wait a minute, I'm not the next generation anymore? What if, looking here in the room, most of you are definitely the next generation, but at some point there's going to be people, you're going to be sitting at this desk, and there's going to be people in the room criticizing you. Now, criticizing, offering solutions, helping, saying, we're the next generation, you should listen to us. How would you build that continuous changeover, right? Because, yeah, in a couple of years, there will be a new generation who are now in school saying, wait a minute, what you guys have done, that's, listen to us. How would you go about, when do you recognize that point? I'm not talking as like age fix, but for yourself, recognize, wait a minute, I'm actually not the next gen. There is other people coming in with those things. That just maybe not for today or for first day would be an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer, but it's an interesting discussion. Yeah.
And I just got sent a picture. There's a really long line at lunch, so don't need to run out of here. You have to wait anyways out there. So I just want to stay here for a few more comments. Yeah.
Someone who's worked in talent acquisition and human resources and growing organizations. I'm always looking at like kind of next generation, what resonates with people coming out of college or out of grad school. And having been a millennial myself, as a millennial, like I feel like my time has passed when it comes to like these like vibrant ideas coming up, and even like how it impacts the workplace, how it impacts the organizations you work for. And being now 20 years into my career, I've seen like no organization is going to pass every purity test as far as your core standards, what you want, paying you enough to survive, paying for you to do other things as well. And I'm just curious, as this next generation coming up, what really resonates with you as far as what I demand from the organizations I work for, or what I demand from the mission or the vision? What does that kind of look like for anyone who wants to be considered represented in that?
I think transparency goes a long way, especially,
Yeah.
I mean,
So define that for me.
well, just having a set out plan and just staying true to your word, and really being clear, like if you do this, if the organization does this, then they really do that, and they don't interfere with other matters, which there are other organizations for, or at least without making it clear to everyone involved in the process that they're doing this here and then. But so there's a lot more to it as well.
To like attached to that, I think also being open to what is happening in the company as well, because the only one I know about is the one my dad's in, and it's a lot about, yeah, it's going great, everything's great, and we're doing well, and you're all doing such a good job. And then what I hear from my dad is like, no one's doing anything and nothing's working. So I think so I think being positive is great, but also being realistic with people there, so that because if no one knows what's happening, if no one knows that there is a problem, no one can tackle the problem, basically. Or if you have superiors who are saying like, oh yeah, but there is no problem, then they won't really manage like with people, I don't want to say below them, but like the others to tackle the problem as well. So I think that latches on with transparency.
And there are questions that are going to continue to be asked. I mean, this session is hosted through the Next Humanitarian Network, where we're asking those questions. We have a lot of group from Tilburg here as well. We have other people who are associated, and there's a stand for the Next Humanitarians. Lots of people who are always passing through, of people who are interested and identify with that. And there are definitely questions we ask, but it's also different for everyone. As we had some friendly faces drinks, some networking yesterday night, and we had some different ideas come up. Some people just want a seat at the table. Some people want to change the table to be like a standing room only kind of thing. It's like you kind of flip the table, people want and have different ideas for it. And the question is, which organizations and which spaces are then suited for that, right? Are you suited for a big UN kind of thing? Or are you looking to be more part of the small organization, community led? Or are you going to go more into the philanthropic position? Or are you going to go into research and teaching, right? And these are all different spaces, obviously.
I think from my side, a final note is indeed, if you want to bounce more ideas off, like see maybe what the next generation thinks, or just learn about what we do, then our stand is right there, 37.
Or also in general to have the discussion, not between, as us and them, but, with a mixed crowd of experienced humanitarians and the next generation of humanitarians. Because I mean, I also speak from I've less than a year in the sector, and I mean, I have a big mouth, so probably I speak about stuff that I don't know the full story about, which experienced humanitarians can teach me and challenge. So just to have the conversations, have it in a transparent way, because of course all organizations cannot be pure, But in other industries, we see, was not all, but we see organizations who manage to be transparent about who they are. And of course, people mostly can see they're definitely not pure, it's not perfect, but they're being transparent about what they're doing, where they get the money from, where they, you know, and we're not being transparent about that in this sector.
It might be even a step in front of that. I think a lot of like the people here, you've made it to Geneva, right? You've already passed a couple of barriers. Looking at my own class, the 600 students I teach every year have no clue this world exists. And you know, the big organizations, banks, and they're all recruiting them, right? So I think that is also a thing that we could change, you know, bringing in this expertise from different fields, whether it's through academia or volunteering or youth. And then that could be on the inspiring side, but also on the humanitarian side, we could do things to be more open, right? Why do we use 600 acronyms? Why do we say boo instead of base or something like that? So why do we need to, like, I think sometimes people also want to make this world more exciting and special because it makes us feel more special. Instead of saying, no, this is also a place you can work, you know, it's bring in your skills. We need you as well. So I think that kind of facilitation will also help bring in more people.
And out of the box thinking.
Yeah, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just
The three of you, I think. Did you have a comment as well?
No, yeah, I think he is somewhat touched on the point I was just going to make. I think the question I think we have right now is obviously who's the next generation, right? Who's the next generation? Who's a humanitarian? I've been hearing a lot of comments about grad students and people are sort of like broken through the barriers that are out there. We should also be asking ourselves who are the humanitarians that actually haven't been able to break those barriers that we've had. And I think sometimes we tend to keep the focus, the common focus, right, on certain groups of people as well. We must give them different types of beneficiaries and all that, but they are also part of the humanitarian, and I do think there would be the next generation of humanitarians as well. So I think sometimes we want to look into the privilege we have as well, and not. I think the point someone made about being elitist, I think is a tricky one. I think hopefully the next generation of humanitarians are looking at why is it so that particular people can't get into the spaces and have their voices heard by certain organizations and actually seen differently. So yeah, there was just straight to make the point of that we need to be breaking barriers and have a bit more voices, not just maybe similar voices, but more diverse voices in rooms like this as well, hopefully.
Last two comments before we finally wrap it up.
Just on that, on the point of transparency and how actually I think it often creates more barriers. And it creates paradoxically more opacity because you have more acronyms, more systems of professionalization and more hierarchy that make it very difficult for the people who are affected to actually engage. Yeah, there's this kind of weird tension there that I think needs to be examined. And I'm thinking about it too with your presentation and the circles of different types of humanitarians or different types of aid workers and how they interact and how information flows between them and how knowledge is shared and how often systems that are supposed to promote transparency actually make it more difficult to have a natural kind of flow of interactions.
Yeah, I would like to sort of also add to what Kenny said was sorry, 1 second, my brain just stopped working. With being might be the wrong words, but with being open about how many institutions are actually taking part in humanitarian aid. Because before I came here, I'm pretty sure I only knew not even half of the NGOs and organizations that are on the first floor or on the ground floor, saying here we are and this is what we do. So I think if you open it up a bit more and actually show okay, it's not just the UN, and it's also all these other organizations where you can help and where you can actually also do more hands-on things, I think that would definitely change a lot. And also opening that up to people who want to help and want to do stuff.
Yeah. Well, these thoughts are definitely not over. I can definitely tell there's still thoughts going on, but I think it is time to wrap it up. You requested some final closing thoughts that you had here.
I just want to say, having met you at the stand, I was very curious to know what is the next generation. We are a few old farts who are going for the exit strategy. Thank you for that. And I don't like being labeled as the post-truth generation. That just brings up, I asked an inspiring young humanitarian the other day how to deal with my daughters, how to speak to them. She said, listen, I've heard that one before, but what does it mean to listen? I'm not going to compare you to my daughters, but I'm here, and I think Jürgen is also here, you know, too old operational, you're more theoretical, aspired, sorry, let's not go there, but we are here to listen, and I am thrilled to hear what I'm hearing right now. And with Kenny and the Teams platform, wow, it's about time. Now, sorry, how can we help? You need a symposium, and I like the, you know, your what you call podcasts and aspects and getting your voices out there. There's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of competition as well from I see it, a lot more than it was in our generation. Now, it's a question of how can you get your voices out? How do we use it? How do we grab all these fantastic ideas that you have? And I'm just saying, reaching out to Kenny, because that's my focal point on this one, is how can we help if you want to be helped? And my last one is, you know, can we chuck the UN system and reinvent another one? I mean, that's just to think big.
I hope you're coming on Thursday night. But thank you all so much for joining. It was really a pleasure to hear from, I think, basically everybody who joined spoke or had some sort of interest at some point, which is really awesome to hear. We have a stand, so please, more thoughts come up. Please come by, share them, ask questions. We have other sessions coming up this afternoon. I guess it's just like an hour or two or something like that. We have a session getting started in the humanitarian aid work field. We have a next humanitarians closing on Thursday during the day. We have virtual buddies happening throughout the coffee hours to connect with virtual young next generation participants who may have not been able to be here in person. And of course, there's all of us running around constantly trying to coordinate and work together and see how things work out. But thanks once again. Feel free to come up with any questions at any time. And if anyone wants to sit together for lunch and continue these conversations, that's where I'm going after this. Thank you very much.
See you back at 2:00.
Bye.